What's up, YouTube, and welcome to my pickups video for the month of February 2020. Didn't do a whole lot of travel this month, but I did have some great pickups at a local game convention we had here in the St. Louis area, which was MoGameCon Jr. And typically MoGameCon has been an annual event that happens around the month of August here in St. Louis, but actually the founders of it decided to do an additional one that was a little bit more of just a swap meet type event. No special guests, less hoopla around it, and just do it in the month of February, which was a great way to kick off the month. I got a lot of great stuff there, and to be honest, found more games and stuff at this con than I did at the last full-blown ones that they've had. So hopefully they'll do a few more of these, and I think it was a great event. Probably seen some videos of that on here, and it's just a little bit late, me showing you the stuff I got on there, because it was the very first day of the month, and I always like to do my pickups at the end of the month going into the next month. So that being said, let's go ahead and get this started, start talking about some of the stuff I found this month. It was another big month for me to find a lot of Neo Geo CD games, and I've been telling you guys in my last few videos that that's been my primary focus after getting a Neo Geo CD-Z system. So I'm really trying to bulk up my library with some of the great games that came out for that system. So the first one of these is actually my first US market game that I've bought for the system. All my other games are Japanese, and this is Top Hunter. This is a great 2D action game, and it really pushes the system as far as compared to some of the earlier CD games. This was one of the first 100 meg games, I think, that came out for the Neo Geo, and really does a nice job with the CD translation. This game actually had some of the developers from, or some of the game developers from the company Nazca that worked on this, and you can see the very close resemblance to Metal Slug. This actually came out earlier, but it has a lot of similar bosses and enemy weapons that resemble the Metal Slug series, so I can highly recommend this. It's not necessarily a run and gun, but if you like that style of artwork, I think you would really enjoy this game, and I really had a lot of fun beating this a couple days ago. Another game I got for the Neo CD is the original Puzzle Bobble, and it's kind of surprising I didn't buy this very first, considering what a huge fan I am of the Bubble Bobble and Puzzle Bobble, aka Bust a Move series games. This is just the same game as you would play if you played this on a Neo Geo hardware at the arcade, and always a great classic puzzle game. I got instantly addicted to this, popping it in again. I've been playing this series forever, and I thought I would play for a good 10 or 15 minutes, and I looked at the clock and it was 2 hours later. So that's really the addictiveness that the series provides. The only thing I would say is missing from this version of the game is it doesn't have the enhanced mode that the Super Nintendo and Sega Game Gear version has, and that it has an endless mode you can play in those two releases. Understandably so, because you wouldn't want people hogging your arcade on a single quarter all day, but very cool to see this nice translation brought to the Neo CD, and I probably will continue to play this quite a bit. Then we move into kind of a very unique release for the Neo Geo and Neo Geo CD, and that is the Crossed Swords games. This is a kind of first-person action RPG. There is leveling up and some good experience that you can gain in this game. So it's really a little bit more deep than your average arcade game. I do believe the arcade version supported the memory card, so the idea was that you could play this in little chunks and continue to go back into the arcade and pick up where your character left off. But it works great with the Neo CD because it has built-in memory to the system, and just really having a lot of fun playing this game. I'd never been exposed to it in the past, and I think this is a really cool series. Then I'll go into 3 games I actually got at MoGameCon Jr. So there was actually a local seller that was selling off the bulk of his Neo CD collection, which was perfect timing, and I kind of wish I'd got a few more games from him, but I was trying to watch how I was budgeting for all the things I wanted to get at the con. So he hooked me up a very good deal on these 3 games, and I'll show you these next. The first one of these is the Super Spy. This is a very early Neo Geo game from the arcade, and it is a first-person action game. There's a lot of these first-person games on the system for some reason. Basically, you are punching, stabbing, and shooting into the screen at various enemies that come straight to you and attack, and probably a little bit repetitive overall, but it is entertaining nonetheless. And just a really good, interesting early arcade game for the system that would have been pretty unique for the time, I think, if you stood this up to other arcade games that were out around that time. Another one I got is, I think the Japanese version, or way to pronounce this is Raggy. I've heard it said a few different ways. It's also known as Blues Journey in the US, so that's probably the easier title to say. This is essentially a very, very drugged out 2D action platformer by 80K. That's the best way I can describe it. There's some very, very odd stuff happening in this game that I feel like had to have been influenced by some mind-altering substances. However, it is a very fun action platformer to play, and I think that it's kind of like a more adult Mario with some of the things going on in this game. So, interesting boss battles, very large bosses, and really just has a lot of variety to the gameplay. It's kind of Wonder Boyish in a little bit because you do some shopping along the way also, and this game also saves your progress, so it's a good one to just kind of pick up, play in chunks, and then start back where you left off. So really enjoying this, and another game just I hadn't had much exposure to in the arcade. Just talked about Cross Swords a few minutes ago, and this is actually the Neo Geo CD exclusive Cross Swords 2. So yes, the Neo Geo CD did have some games that did not come out on arcade hardware and were exclusive to the console. And really this is a more fleshed out sequel to the original. Plays very much the same, but has some enhanced graphics. This was a little bit of a later release. Just really repeats that action RPG playstyle for the system. It's very, very much worth picking up, and very cool to see a neat exclusive like that. The last game I got from Neo CD this month is a series. I love action puzzle games, but honestly this is a series I've played very little of, and that is Magical Drop. And this is the only game that came out on the Neo CD. It's Magical Drop 2. Very, very fast-paced action puzzle game. It's not something you can just pick up and casually play like Puzzle Bobble. You really have to have some dedication if you want to get anywhere in this game. So I'm learning the game, definitely. It has some cool strategy to it, and I can see why this game has a lot of different sequels that came out even after this one. So definitely will be playing this one some more too. So that does it for the Neo Geo CD stuff I got. Like I said, that was primarily what I was looking for this month, and we'll probably see that continue over the next month as well. So I'm going to move on to another game I got at the con. This is originally an arcade shooter that got an enhanced version for PC Engine CD, and that is Hellfire S. This game actually does have some unique differences compared to the Sega Genesis version. This game actually does support 2 players. The Genesis version is just a 1-player game, and this was one of the games that NEC Avenue did a very enhanced version just for the PC Engine. So they typically was like an in-house NEC developer that would take arcade games and really tweak them a lot for the home console release, so they weren't just a straight port of the arcade game. So what they really did with this one is enhance the soundtrack. It has some really good music in it, and definitely took some liberties with some of the bosses and graphics of the game as compared to the arcade, or especially the Sega Genesis version. So definitely enjoying this, and doesn't really go for a whole lot compared to some of the PC Engine shooters, so I would definitely recommend that if you like the Toaplan arcade shooters. Next, we're going to talk about a game that my buddy Tom, aka the Golden Age Gamer on YouTube, gave me at MoGameCon. He was selling games at a booth, and I think he's already done a video kind of covering how all that went. But I was eyeing this in his booth, and it was very convenient because I had just read about this in a vintage game magazine. This is Dom Stomp Land, and it's a very weird action party game that came out in Japan that was heavily endorsed by New Balance shoes. So there's like New Balance branding all over this game, which is a little bit quirky. But it does have just some easy pick up and play action oriented gameplay with a bunch of different characters and things like that. I read about it in an old Tips and Tricks magazine as a just kind of hidden import that you should check out, and I don't remember reading anything about this back in the day, so it obviously is a very low game on the radar. You can get this game very cheap if you're interested, but it's definitely worth picking up and playing for a few minutes. Next, we're going to move on to a Sega Master System game that I got. This is actually a Euro exclusive for the system, and this is the Cyber Shinobi. And I am a huge fan of the Shinobi series. You're going to hear a little bit more about that here shortly. But this is one of the games I'd always wondered about because I knew it was exclusive to the Master System. There's no arcade version of this. And I read some really bad reviews of this, and unfortunately it is pretty true. It has some super choppy scrolling in it, and just really frustrating combat style that is not like the other Shinobi games at all. The graphics actually are decent for this, and I think that's another thing that people have complained about, but I really thought for the Master System that's decent. But I don't know what went wrong with this one. It clearly was farmed out to a lesser developer than Sega's first-party team that worked on some of the other Shinobi games. So can't really recommend it, but definitely think it's an interesting piece of the Shinobi series, which, like I said, you probably will be hearing more about shortly. So next we're going to move on to a couple portable games, and I've been also trying to collect for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, but only in complete condition and really just going for those US releases. I haven't had a whole lot of luck lately. Even on eBay, they've really dried up the last few months. So I'm even starting to open my mind to buying some of the Japanese releases, because some of them, if your console is set to English, will play in full English. And this is one of those releases. So this is my first Japanese, or actually my second Japanese game I've bought for the system. This is Big Tournament Golf, which is also known as the words that I can't remember right now. There is a US version of this that is very popular. It's going to come back to me in just a second. But definitely like this series. The very cool Neo Geo arcade game. And then also came out on the Pocket Color with some scaled down graphics, but definitely retains some of the classic gameplay of the original. And the other thing I noticed about this is it comes in just this really cool hard plastic clamshell case that the Japanese games came out in. This is way more elaborate than the flimsy cardboard cases we got in the US. It's kind of a shame that all the games didn't come out in this format, but definitely think this is a very cool release and very playable on the go. The other release I got is for the Nintendo 3DS. This is a system I still don't even own. I don't know why. I still haven't bought a 3DS or a 2DS. But this is Shinobi for the 3DS, and this one was actually American developed, I believe, or European developed. It is not a Japanese developed game. I think it got decent reviews, but it doesn't, again, it deviates a lot from the Shinobi style. Looking forward to trying it out if I ever get the system to play this on, but again, you might be sensing a theme here that I've got something in my mind with buying Shinobi games. Which leads me to the next thing I want to show you, and I've already done a video on this, so I'm not going to show you the arcade board, but I bought the arcade release of the original Shinobi, and it came with the original marquee, which has very cool artwork. So this is a very cool piece of my collection. I really like this arcade game, always wanted this, and what I actually did to the arcade board, if you haven't watched that video, is I was able to resurrect the dead board due to the suicide battery that it has on the PCB. So if you're interested in arcade repair, a very simple fix, if you have a Sega System 16 board, you can check out that video. But I do have a great playing Shinobi arcade board in my collection now. So that's 3 Shinobi games this month so far. Could I possibly be brewing a Shinobi special for my channel? Well, we'll just have to wait and see then, won't we? So that's all I'm going to say about that. Next up is the weirdest thing I got all month. This is not something at all I was like hunting for. I don't know how you could have been, but it was a very pleasant surprise at my local chain video game store, and that is Ninja Gaiden 2 for NES in the original Blockbuster rental case. Somebody traded it in this way. And I thought just a few things were interesting about this, and that it has the original case with an Blockbuster video location that was local to my St. Louis area, and inside of it has the original cartridge. Get this open. And it has tons of authentic Blockbuster stickers, which normally I wouldn't be interested in, but it goes well with this. So it has your typical Be Kind, Please Rewind, even though it's a Nintendo game sticker on it. It's got some security stickers. It has the rental sticker with the barcode on the back. So this one was very much marked up for Blockbuster use. And then the other thing I thought was cool about the case is it has the original play notes, or whatever you want to call it, that took the place of the instruction booklet. So it has a couple of them stuck on both panels of the inside of the case. Very, very authentic condition. There's the back of the case as well with all the Blockbuster artwork. And I just thought this would be a neat piece for my collection to keep, just because I am a huge Ninja Gaiden fan, so it was just very coincidental that not only did I find a Blockbuster case game, but it is a game of, or a case for a game that I really enjoy the series of. So very cool to have this. I'm not the most nostalgic Blockbuster video person. I definitely was of the Prime era that they were huge, and remember going to a few of their locations, but we actually had a local grocery store video chain that I thought had a better Nintendo selection back in the day. Most of the time I used to get my video games there. So I know a lot of people are very nostalgic for Blockbuster. I think it's a very cool piece for the collection, but personally I don't have a whole lot of Blockbuster stories to share. So that really does it for all the games I picked up. I'm going to show you some of the other stuff I got this month. I did get 3 upgrades to complete for my collection. So this was a very, very clean copy of Afterburner for the NES. A very, very choppy, poor port of the Sega arcade game, but kind of cool that Tengen released a Sega game for the NES unlicensed. So there's a few of these, but this is kind of neat that these exist. And the condition of this was great. It had the original Tengen sleeve in it. It had the poster. The cartridge is in excellent shape, so manual, of course, as well. And just very happy to get another one of those in my collection, especially for a Sega release. Another thing I got at MoGameCon was a box for a game I really enjoy on the Super Nintendo, which is the Ignition Factor. And I actually already had the loose manual for this, so now I have a complete copy of this as well. I think this is still a very underrated Jalico release for the system, and doesn't really go for a ton, so if it's something you haven't played, it's just an interesting top-down action game with some unique twists to it. The other thing I just recently got is a very, very nice condition, complete-in-the-box copy of UN Squadron, and this actually upgraded a very ratty box that I had in my collection already, so definitely happy to upgrade another one of the shooters for the Super Nintendo to a complete-in-box copy, and very happy to have that as well. So another shout out I have for Tom, I already gave him one shout out in this video, and I definitely will link his channel in the description. He actually, when we met up a few weeks ago, gave me a big box full of the original black NES sleeves. And I am trying to get all of my NES games eventually into these original sleeves. I just hate buying them piecemeal because stores want like $1 or $2 a piece for them, and it's not very cost efficient when you have hundreds of NES games. So probably give me a box of about 40 or 50 of these if I had to guess. I've already gone through and resorted my games, or another shelf of my NES collection into these sleeves, and so far chipping away at least getting all of these into these at some point in my life. So thank you very much to Tom for doing that for me. It was very cool. Definitely much appreciated. So the very last thing I want to show this month, and this is going to take a moment, is I also got a huge stack of magazines at the MoGameCon Jr. And if you watch my channel, you know I love buying retro video game magazines, but one thing that is prohibitive is buying them on eBay, because sometimes the shipping costs more than the magazine itself. So very cool when you can get a deal on these in person, and I bought a big stack from a seller at MoGameCon. So go ahead and show you all these. I got, first off, a nice stack of very early Electronic Gaming Monthly, or EGM, magazines, and I basically picked up every early issue he had, and just a couple other ones that interested me based on the cover art. So we're actually going to start off with issue number 9, is the earliest one of these, and this is a kind of pixelated, not so good looking cover for Castlevania 3 of all things. But very happy to have that one. I think that's the earliest EGM I actually own in my collection. And then I also got issue 10, which is for Super C, or Super Contra. Very similar situation there, very pixelated artwork. I think they started to figure out soon after that they needed to do something a little better. This one is issue 11. This is the Moffat Conspiracy. And this one they just basically used the original game box art. This is one that I think is very cool. This is, I showed you that Blockbuster case. This is the EGM for Ninja Gaiden 2. And this is issue number 12. So again, another nice early issue. I didn't get issue 13, but I had issue 14, which is Mega Man 3. Again, I think it's just basically the box artwork repeated. Then we go to issue number 16, and this was the world premiere of Super Mario Bros. 4, or Super Mario World as it came to be known. Again, back to that pixelated artwork on the cover. Then we go into issue number 17, which is a Simpsons issue, and Simpsons were all the rage about the time that this came out, so it was a good fit. Also has a really cool Shadow of the Ninja artwork on the back, or advertisement on the back. Love that game. One thing I want to say about these early EGMs that kind of stood out to me is I'd read a lot of like 92, 93 era EGMs, and the NES was still pumping out quite a few games at that time, but they all got reviewed very low. Is that, you know, NES, that's an old system. We don't like that. We only talk about next gen, aka 16-bit stuff and up. And those games really got a bad rap in the magazine, but what I thought was neat about these early ones, or surprising, was that even these issues from like 1990 or so, several of the NES games were really getting panned, and they were saying that, you know, well, it just doesn't have that look of the Sega Genesis or TurboGrafx 16 games, so it's just not that good. And some of these games that got very low scores are considered classics on the NES today. So, I don't know. It was an interesting perspective I didn't expect going back to some of these. So back on track, I got issue number 18. This is a G.I. Joe for NES cover. Very cool. Then this one was definitely a joy to read. I actually already went through all these and read them. This is issue 19, which is for, is this Bonk's Revenge? I think it's Bonk's Revenge on TurboGrafx 16, or maybe the first Bonk. But this issue was totally written with my heart in mind. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, "Behind the Screens at Taito of America." So they actually did a 4-page tour of Taito of America in this issue, and being a huge Taito fan, that was a big treat to see. some interviews with some of the key players at Taito of America from that era. And Taito of America actually has been closed since about 1995, so it was very cool that they got that into one of these early issues before they no longer existed. The next one is issue 20, which was for Battletoads on the NES. Again, just using the box art. And then we have issue 22, Sonic the Hedgehog. This one's a little bit later, but I thought it was a cool cover, so I wanted it. This is for Super Double Dragon on Super Nintendo. I think it's like a 92 issue or so. So that's all the EGMs. Like I said, several of the key, very early issues of that magazine. Then we move into another magazine that I really didn't have a whole lot of in my collection, which is Video Games and Computer Entertainment. And I got some very early issues of that as well. This is the June 89 RoboCop issue. These were a little bit different than EGM in that they covered things like PC games in addition to console games and arcade games. But they were probably written a little bit more mature. The only thing I will say is the graphic layout of the magazine is just not as appealing as an EGM. So it's kind of the old, do you want content or do you want pretty graphics to look at as you read your magazine? Kind of pick your poison, but these definitely are still worth reading if you get a chance to pick up some of these. This one is for July 89. This is a TurboGrafx 16 cover, right when that system launched. Thought that was pretty cool. Then we have September 89. This is a Power Glove issue. Very cool cover. They also did a lot of interpretive artwork. This is for December 89. This is, I can't even remember which game it was promoting. I think it's an early TurboGrafx game. It's a little hard to tell. It might be Legendary Axe. I don't really know what's going on there. You can tell me in the comments. This one I thought was neat too. This is again one of their more interpretive covers. This is May 1990. This is a Military Madness cover for TurboGrafx, a game I really like. Then we have July 1990, and it's another TurboGrafx cover. This one is for when the Turbo Express Portable launched, a system that I do not own but would definitely love to have. Then they did their own take of a G.I. Joe cover in July 91. So it's G.I. Joe for the NES. Kind of a cool cover. So that's all of those I got. The seller actually had a whole lot more, but I was trying to be careful just how many magazines I was bringing home. But then I did get some other different types of magazines. This is one that was completely off my radar, and I kind of would like to get some more of these. This is New Type Gaming, and I think this only lasted for about 6 or 7 issues or so. This was a spin-off of the popular New Type anime magazine that still exists today, as far as I know. And this really did have some nice import game coverage and was pretty heavy on fighting games, which I guess was pretty normal at that era, 1994 or so. The artwork on it's a little bit weird. I don't know if that's the best artwork for the cover. And inside the screenshots are a little bit hazy as well, I would say. But definitely a cool magazine. It has some nice like fold-out posters and stuff like that on it. It's a nice quality print paper too. So if I ever find some more of these, I would definitely pick them up. Then we'll go into another magazine that was short-lived. This is kind of a generic title. Video Games, the Ultimate Gaming Magazine. And this Spider-Man cover, which was around like the Super Nintendo and Genesis game for the animated series, really has a well-written article in it around the history of Spider-Man and video games. And it covers all the games that were released up to this point, about 1995. So I kind of want to get some more of these also, because they really did a more in-depth look at a game series than I've ever seen in any EGM of the era. The magazine's a little thin, but this actually morphed into a different magazine I'm going to show you shortly here, and it had several of the same writers working for it. So again, I was more familiar with the follow-up, which is this magazine, Tips and Tricks, and this was a very cool find at the con. This is actually issue 1 of Tips and Tricks. So something I wasn't necessarily looking for, but very happy to have. The heading on it is quite a bit different than where it went to in the later issues, but overall the style of the magazine is very similar, and you can see how they were transitioning from Video Games magazine here at the top, that this was turning into Tips and Tricks. So I've always maintained that Tips and Tricks unfortunately has just tons of pages of codes, which are really irrelevant now, but the writers definitely cared and were really into some more interesting games and did some nice like sidebars and things like that to work in some reviews and other content within the magazine. So they're still pretty fun to read. This one has a very cool Ninja Warriors Super Nintendo ad on the back too, so I gotta call that out. And then the very last magazine, I know this video is probably getting too long by this point, is a much later issue of Tips and Tricks. Just had a cool Spider-Man for PlayStation cover I decided to go ahead and grab. So nice to get a later issue of the magazine as well. So, like I said, a lot of stuff, a lot of magazines. Hopefully I didn't bore you with all the magazine talk, but thank you for watching. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.